The massive Imperial warships appeared without warning in Earth's orbit on a quiet Tuesday morning. They emerged from the darkness of space, their hulls gleaming with an alien metal that absorbed rather than reflected sunlight. There were 12 ships in total, each one larger than the biggest aircraft carrier ever built by human hands. Commander Alex Hayes of the United Earth Defense Force was the first to detect the unusual energy signatures approaching the planet. He had been monitoring the deep space radar system when the alerts began to sound. At first, he thought it might be a system malfunction, nothing that size should have been able to approach Earth undetected for so long. "Sir, you need to see this," Alex called to his supervisor, pointing at the screen where 12 massive objects had suddenly appeared in high Earth orbit. Within minutes, the UEDF headquarters transformed from its usual calm efficiency into organized chaos. Alex rushed through the corridors, tablet in hand, heading toward the main command center where General Susan Miller would be assembling the emergency response team. The general was already there when Alex arrived, her face grim as she studied the incoming data on the main display. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and eyes that had seen 3 wars on Earth. Now she faced something entirely different. "Tell me what we know, Commander," she said when Alex entered. 12 vessels, unknown origin, approximately 2 miles long each. They appeared simultaneously in orbit with no warning. "Our systems didn't detect any approach vectors," Alex reported, his voice steady despite the fear building inside him. General Miller nodded. "And their capabilities?" "Unknown, but the energy readings are off the charts. Nothing in our database matches their signature." As they spoke, the first images from space telescopes appeared on the screens around them. The ships were unlike anything humans had ever built, smooth and oval-shaped with no visible windows or external features, except for what appeared to be weapon ports along their sides. "Get me the president," General Miller ordered an aide. "And initiate Defense Protocol Alpha. I want every missile system online and all spacecraft grounded immediately." Before the aide could respond, one of the technicians shouted from across the room, "General, the vessels are deploying smaller craft. Hundreds of them." On the screens, they watched as the alien motherships opened like flowers, releasing swarms of smaller vessels that began to descend toward Earth's atmosphere. In Washington, D.C., NASA astrophysicist Dr. Kevin Porter watched the same images on his laboratory screens with growing horror. For years, he had argued that humanity needed to prepare for extraterrestrial contact, but few had taken his warning seriously. Now, as the first energy beam struck New York City, he realized that first contact would not be peaceful. The attack began with precision strikes against population centers. New York, London, Beijing, Moscow. Each city was targeted by dozens of the smaller alien craft. They fired blue-white energy beams that cut through buildings as if they were made of paper. Skyscrapers collapsed, bridges fell, and panic spread across the globe as news of the attack spread. Kevin was still watching the destruction when 3 military officers burst into his laboratory. "Dr. Porter?" the lead officer asked. "I'm Major Frank Richards. You need to come with us immediately." "What's happening?" Kevin asked, though he already knew the answer. "That's classified, sir, but your expertise is needed. Please come now." 20 minutes later, Kevin found himself being escorted through the underground levels of the Pentagon, passing through security checkpoints until they reached a room he hadn't known existed. Inside, military personnel and government officials worked frantically at computer stations while a large screen showed the ongoing attack. Eleanor Wright, the Secretary of Defense, approached him as soon as he entered. She was a stern-looking woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for being brutally efficient. "Dr. Porter, thank you for coming quickly. We need your insight into what we're facing," she said, leading him to a display showing detailed scans of the alien vessels. Kevin studied the data, noting the unusual energy signatures and the way the ships seemed to bend space around them. "These are far beyond our technology," he said quietly. "The propulsion system alone must be at least 200 years ahead of anything we've developed." Eleanor nodded grimly. "That's what our experts say too. But here's what's strange. They're deliberately avoiding our military installations. Look at the attack pattern." She brought up a global map showing red dots where the aliens had struck, Each one was a major city or population center, but military bases, power plants, and communications hubs remained untouched. They're not trying to disable our defenses, Kevin realized. They want us alive but terrified. Exactly, Eleanor agreed. They're breaking our spirit, not our capability to fight back. These aren't random attacks. They're a message. They want surrender. Kevin watched as more cities were hit. The death toll was already in the thousands and climbing rapidly. Earth's conventional defenses were scrambling to respond, but fighter jets and anti-aircraft missiles proved largely ineffective against the alien technology. What they don't know, Eleanor said in a lower voice, is that we've been preparing for something like this. Kevin looked at her in surprise. What do you mean? Instead of answering directly, Eleanor led him to another screen where a man in a military uniform was directing an operation deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. 3 years ago, we detected unusual signals from the edge of the solar system. Nothing conclusive, but enough to worry some people in positions of power. Project Deterrent was initiated as a result. Kevin's eyes widened as he began to understand what he was seeing on the screen. That's a quantum displacement device? It shouldn't be possible with current technology. Eleanor's expression remained neutral. Current public technology, yes, but we've had advantages. A crashed scout ship in 2118 gave us a head start. Most of the project's scientists couldn't even comprehend what they were working with, but they made progress. Outside, the sky had darkened as smoke from burning cities drifted into the atmosphere. Emergency broadcasts played on some of the screens, showing scenes of destruction and chaos as people fled from the alien attackers. They think we're primitive, Eleanor said, studying the attack patterns on a holographic display. They're deliberately keeping our military intact while they break our spirit. They want surrender, not obliteration. Kevin watched as another building collapsed on screen, feeling a mixture of fear and anger rise within him. So what's the plan? Eleanor's eyes hardened. We're going to send them a message they can't ignore. President Gregory Howard has authorized Operation Defiance. As if on cue, the president's voice came through on the command center's speakers, addressing the emergency session of military leaders. The alien forces have made their intentions clear, President Howard said, his voice steady despite the circumstances. They believe we will surrender in the face of superior technology. They are about to learn how wrong they are about humanity. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Lieutenant Carol Bennett supervised the final preparations of humanity's most closely guarded secret. The underground complex stretched for miles, carved into the ancient stone over decades. On official maps, it was marked as a climate research station. The truth was far more significant. Carol walked briskly through the main chamber where 6 massive devices stood in a perfect circle. Each one looked like a silver sphere surrounded by rotating rings of dark metal. Blue energy pulsed between the rings, creating a soft humming sound that filled the chamber. Status report, Carol called out to the team of scientists and engineers working at control stations around the room. Dr. Alan Murphy looked up from his monitor. He was an older man with wild gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too little sleep over the past 3 days. Quantum alignment at 98%. We're almost ready. Alan had been working on the quantum displacement devices for nearly 20 years. The technology had been developed after the recovery of a crashed alien scout ship in 2118, though the public had never been informed. The original ship had contained a strange engine that could bend space in ways that defied human understanding. Sure. Targeting systems are locked and ready, reported another technician. All 6 devices are synchronized. Carol nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. What they were about to do had never been attempted before. The devices had been tested individually at very low power, but using all 6 at once at full strength was a desperate gamble. She checked her watch. It had been 6 hours since the alien attack began. Reports from the surface indicated devastating losses in major cities across the world. The death toll was already in the millions. Her secure communication device buzzed. It was a direct line to the Pentagon Command Center. Lieutenant Bennett, this is Secretary Wright. The President has authorized Operation Defiance. You are cleared to proceed. Carol took a deep breath. Understood, Madam Secretary. We're initiating now. She turned to address the room. This is not a drill. Begin final countdown sequence for Operation Defiance. Around the world, Earth's conventional military forces were engaging the alien vessels as a distraction. Fighter jets and missile systems attacked the smaller crafts, while naval vessels fired artillery at the larger ships. The human weapons were largely ineffective against the Imperial shields, but they weren't meant to cause damage. They only needed to hold the aliens' attention. In space, Admiral Kravex of the Zordic Empire watched with satisfaction as his forces systematically destroyed Earth's major population centers. The primitive defenses the humans had mustered were barely worth acknowledging. Their missiles exploded harmlessly against his ship's energy shields, and their aircraft were easily shot down by automated defense systems. Status report, he commanded. His second-in-command, a tall, gray-skinned warrior named Drell. The assault proceeds as planned, Admiral, Drell responded. 17 major population centers have been neutralized. Resistance is minimal and ineffective. Kravex nodded. And the humans' governing authorities? No formal communication yet. Our analysts predict they will attempt negotiation within the next 12 hours, with unconditional surrender following within 72. The Admiral made a sound of approval. The Earth conquest was proceeding exactly according to Imperial protocol. First, demonstrate overwhelming force. Next, accept surrender. Finally, extract resources and establish control. It had worked on 17 worlds across 3 star systems. Earth would be no different. Admiral, interrupted an officer at the monitoring station. Our sensors are detecting unusual energy readings from the planet's surface. Kravex turned. Explain. Unknown energy signature, building rapidly in the region their maps label as the Rocky Mountains. It doesn't match any known human technology. Before the Admiral could respond, another officer called out in alarm. Massive energy spike detected near the gas giant. On the main view screen, a blinding flash appeared near Jupiter. When the light faded, Ganymede, Jupiter's largest moon, had vanished completely. In its place was nothing but a slowly expanding cloud of dust and debris. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Kravex felt fear. Back in the underground facility, Carol and her team watched the successful demonstration with a mixture of awe and horror. The quantum displacement devices had worked perfectly. Ganymede, a moon larger than the planet Mercury, had been completely vaporized, its very molecular structure torn apart by the artificial rift in space-time. Energy dissipation nominal, reported Allen, his voice shaking slightly. All 6 devices functioning within expected parameters. Carol allowed herself a moment of relief before activating her communication device. Command, this is Lieutenant Bennett. The demonstration was successful, awaiting further orders. At the Pentagon, General Susan Miller and Dr. Kevin Porter watched the live feed from space telescopes showing the remains of Ganymede spreading into a thin ring of particles. It worked, Kevin whispered, hardly believing what he was seeing. The quantum field manipulation actually worked at that scale. General Miller turned to Eleanor Wright. Madam Secretary, we need to send the message now, while they're still processing what they just witnessed. Eleanor nodded grimly. Prepare the President. He needs to deliver our terms immediately. In the Oval Office, President Gregory Howard stood before a camera, his face grave but determined. Behind him was the American flag, and beside him stood representatives from other major world powers, a show of unity in humanity's darkest hour. When the recording began, he spoke clearly and without hesitation. To the commanders of the invading forces currently attacking Earth, what you have just witnessed is not an anomaly or a natural event. The destruction of Jupiter's moon Ganymede was a deliberate demonstration of our defensive capabilities. Paused, letting the words sink in. This is Earth's first and final warning. We have demonstrated a fraction of our defensive capabilities. We possess 6 more quantum displacement devices, each calibrated to your ship's exact coordinates. You have 1 hour to withdraw from our solar system. There will be no negotiation, no surrender, and no second chances. The message was transmitted on all frequencies the aliens had used for their own communications, ensuring they would receive it. In the underground facility, Carol's team had already recalibrated the quantum displacement devices. On her main screen, she could see 6 red targeting markers, each one locked onto one of the largest Imperial warships. If the order came, they would fire again, and this time the target would not be an uninhabited moon. "And now we wait," Alan said quietly, standing beside her. Carol nodded, watching the countdown timer begin its 60-minute descent. 1 hour to see if they're smart enough to leave. Across Earth, in shelters and bunkers and the ruins of cities, people looked to the sky, wondering if humanity's desperate gamble would succeed or if the attack had only just begun. Aboard the Imperial flagship, Admiral Kravek stood in shocked silence as he watched the recording of Ganymede's destruction for the 5th time. The moon, larger than many planets, had simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next, it was nothing but expanding dust. His gray skin had paled to an almost white color, and even his breathing seemed quieter than normal. "Play it again," he ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. The view screen showed the blinding flash once more, followed by the complete disintegration of the massive moon. No explosion in the traditional sense, just matter coming apart at its most basic level. "It's not possible," said his strategic advisor Morrow, who had served the Empire for 50 years across dozens of planetary conquests. "Our intelligence indicated the humans are barely interstellar. They cannot possibly possess weapons of such magnitude." But Zinn, the science officer, disagreed. "The energy signature is unlike anything in our database, Admiral. If they have weaponized quantum field manipulation at this level, they could indeed target our ships with precision." Kravek turned away from the screen. "What are our options?" "It must be a bluff," Morrow insisted. "A single demonstration doesn't mean they can target moving vessels. And even if they could, using such a weapon 6 more times would require enormous energy. Their planetary power grid would not support it." Zinn's expression showed her disagreement. "We cannot make that assumption. The humans have clearly concealed significant technological capabilities. We should consider that they might have power sources unknown to us." The Admiral nodded slowly. "Send a probe to what remains of Ganymede. I want detailed analysis." As his officers hurried to comply, Kravek moved to the window of his command chamber. Below, the blue-green planet continued its rotation, deceptively peaceful from this distance. He had conquered 17 worlds during his career. Never once had he encountered a species with both the technological capability and the will to destroy a celestial body as a warning shot. The Empire had rules of engagement, protocols developed over 1,000 years of expansion. Those rules had never accounted for this scenario. On Earth, Lieutenant Carol Bennett monitored the Imperial fleet closely from the underground command center. The 6 remaining quantum displacement devices were indeed targeted on the largest Zordic vessels, just as President Howard had claimed in his message. What he hadn't mentioned was the cost of using them. "If we have to fire again, what happens to our power grid?" Carol asked Dr. Alan Murphy. Alan rubbed his tired eyes. "Complete collapse. The demonstration on Ganymede drained 30% of North America's reserve power. Using all 6 devices simultaneously would cause worldwide blackouts lasting decades. We'd essentially be returning to the pre-industrial age." Carol nodded grimly. These weapons were truly humanity's last resort, a final act of defiance that would ensure mutual destruction. If the aliens called their bluff, the outcome would be devastating either way. "How much time remaining?" she asked. 42 minutes, answered a technician monitoring the countdown. In the Pentagon Command Center, General Susan Miller and Dr. Kevin Porter studied the alien fleet's movements with intense focus. "Any change in their position?" Susan asked. "None, General," replied Officer Paul Grant, a young man whose calm under pressure had earned him a place on this critical team. "They've maintained their orbital formation, but they've stopped deploying attack craft. The bombardment of Paris ceased approximately 5 minutes ago." Kevin pointed to a display showing energy readings from the fleet. "They're running extensive scans, not just of our facilities but of Jupiter as well. They're trying to verify what happened to Ganymede." "Let them look," Susan said. The more convinced they are of our capabilities, the better our chances. Eleanor Wright entered the room, her expression tense. The President is addressing the United Nations emergency session. World leaders are being briefed on Operation Defiance. Susan raised an eyebrow. The full briefing? No, Eleanor replied. Only that we have deployed a weapon capable of deterring the invasion. The details remain classified. Too many would panic if they knew the truth. The truth was that Project Deterrent had been developed by a small coalition of nations operating in secret for decades. Most world governments had no idea what was happening beneath the Rocky Mountains, and they certainly didn't know that humanity's survival now depended on a single bluff. In Florida, Sam Rodriguez huddled with his family in a community shelter beneath a local school. The aliens had not targeted their small coastal town yet, but the sky had grown dark with smoke from Miami, which had been hit hours earlier. Sam held his daughter close as they watched a small television showing news. Broadcasts. The attacks have stopped, announced a reporter, her voice tight with controlled emotion. Reports from around the world confirm that the alien bombardment ceased approximately 15 minutes ago. We don't know why, but there appears to be a lull in the invasion. Sam exchanged glances with his wife, Maria. Like millions of others, around the world they watched and waited, unaware of the diplomatic standoff occurring above their planet. The initial terror had given way to something else, a fierce determination that seemed to spread from person to person. Humanity would not go quietly. Back on the Imperial flagship, the probe's data from Ganymede had arrived. Admiral Kravex studied it with growing concern. "Explain this," he commanded Zinn. The science officer's expression was grave. "The moon wasn't merely destroyed by conventional means, Admiral. The very fabric of spacetime in that region has been fundamentally altered. Matter wasn't just broken apart, it was unwritten from existence." "Could our shields protect against such a weapon?" Kravex asked. Zinn hesitated before answering. "No, Admiral. Our shields are designed to deflect energy and physical impacts. This weapon appears to operate on principles that would bypass those defenses entirely." Morrow stepped forward. "Even so, Admiral, the Empire does not retreat. In 1,000 years of conquest, we have never withdrawn from a target world. To do so now would be unprecedented." Kravex turned to his strategic advisor. "And in 1,000 years, have we ever encountered a species that could destroy a moon as a warning shot?" Silence fell across the command chamber. The Empire's entire approach to conquest relied on technological superiority. When that advantage disappeared, the protocols became less clear. "The humans claim to have 6 weapons targeted at our ships," Kravex said quietly. "Even if they're bluffing about some aspects, the demonstration at Ganymede confirms they possess at least one such device. Are we willing to gamble the entire fleet on the assumption that they cannot or will not use more?" In the mountains of Colorado, Carol Bennett received a communication from the Pentagon. "Lieutenant, we're detecting movement from the Imperial fleet," said General Miller's voice. "Multiple vessels are adjusting their positions." Carol felt her heart rate increase. "Hostile movement?" "Unclear. Maintain targeting lock and stand by for possible countermeasures." The technicians around her worked with renewed urgency, making minute adjustments to ensure the quantum displacement devices remained locked on their targets, despite the fleet's movement. 26 minutes remaining, announced the countdown technician. All across Earth, people looked to the sky, wondering if the aliens would leave or if this was merely the calm before an even more devastating attack. The next half hour would determine the fate of humanity. Admiral Kravex stood at the center of the Imperial flagship's command chamber, surrounded by his senior officers. 15 minutes remained before the humans' deadline expired. The massive view screen showed Earth below them, its blue oceans and swirling white clouds deceptively peaceful from this distance. "The fleet repositioning is complete," reported his second-in-command. "All vessels maintain defensive formation, but we have established withdrawal vectors if needed." Kravex nodded. This small adjustment had been a prudent step, though it felt strange to even consider retreat. In his 1,000 cycles of service to the Zordic Empire, no species had ever forced them to consider abandoning a conquest. "Admiral," Morrow said quietly, I must formally object to any consideration of withdrawal. The Empire's strength lies in our reputation for unstoppable force. If we retreat from these humans, word will spread to our other subject worlds. Your objection is noted, Kravex replied, but I am responsible for the lives of 80,000 Imperial citizens aboard this fleet. We face an unknown weapon that has demonstrated capabilities beyond our defensive measures. Zinn, the science officer, approached with a data tablet. Admiral, I have completed my analysis of the Ganymede incident. The weapon the humans deployed appears to create a localized disruption in the fundamental forces that bind matter together. Simply put, it doesn't destroy, it unmakes. Could it be a natural phenomenon they somehow triggered? Kravex asked, seeking any alternative explanation. No, Admiral. The energy signature is clearly artificial, and the precision targeting rules out any natural event. Morrow stepped forward again. Even if their weapon is real, using it 6 more times would require enormous energy. Their civilization would cripple itself in the process. Perhaps, said Kravex, but a species willing to destroy themselves to defeat us is not one we have protocols for handling. On Earth, in the underground facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, Lieutenant Carol Bennett watched as the countdown timer showed 12 minutes remaining. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. Scientists and military personnel moved between workstations, checking and rechecking systems, ensuring the quantum displacement devices remained locked on, their targets. Dr. Alan Murphy approached her, his face showing the strain of the past days. The calibrations are holding. If we need to fire, we can. Carol nodded. But we hope we won't have to. The power drain would be catastrophic, Alan said quietly. 98% of Earth's electrical systems would fail. Hospitals, water, treatment, food production. Everything would stop. Still better than complete destruction by the Empire, Carol replied. Alan didn't argue. They both knew this was humanity's last resort. A final, desperate gamble that they hoped would convince the aliens to leave without requiring actual use of the remaining weapons. In the Pentagon Command Center, General Susan Miller received updates from space monitoring stations around the world. General, we're detecting energy fluctuations in the Imperial fleet, reported Officer Paul Grant. Their engines are powering up, but they haven't broken orbit yet. Dr. Kevin Porter studied the readings. They might be preparing for either attack or withdrawal. It's hard to tell with technology we don't fully understand. Susan turned to Eleanor Wright. Madam Secretary, we need to inform the President. This could go either way in the next few minutes. Eleanor nodded gravely. He's standing by. The world. Leaders are still in emergency session, waiting for news. Around the globe, people remained in shelters, basements, and bunkers, waiting to learn their fate. News broadcasts showed the alien ships visible in daylight skies as bright points moving against the blue background. The initial attacks had claimed millions of lives, but the sudden halt in the bombardment had given people a chance to regroup, to find loved ones, to hope. In his Florida shelter, Sam Rodriguez held his sleeping daughter while his wife dozed fitfully beside them. The small television continued to broadcast updates, though there was little new information. Like millions of others, Sam didn't know about the quantum displacement devices or the ultimatum. He only knew that the attacks had stopped, and everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Something's changed, said an elderly man sitting nearby, pointing at the TV. Look at how they're talking. The news anchor's expression had shifted, a mix of confusion and cautious hope crossing her face as she listened to her earpiece. We're receiving reports that the alien vessels appear to be changing position. Observers at multiple locations confirm movement in the fleet. We don't yet know what this means, but there is definitely activity. In space, Admiral Kravex made his decision. The human's hour was nearly up, and he had to choose a path forward. He turned to address his command staff. The Empire has existed for 10,000 cycles. In that time, we have conquered hundreds of worlds across dozens of star systems. Our strength lies not just in our weapons or ships, but in our ability to adapt, to recognize when the path forward requires a change in strategy. He paused, looking at the faces of his officers. Some showed confusion, others concern. A few, including Zin, seemed to understand what was coming. The humans have demonstrated technology that violates the fundamental principles of warfare as we understand them. A civilization might possess powerful weapons, but using them should require visible preparation, resource mobilization, and industrial capacity. This instant, surgical strike capability represents something the Empire has never encountered. Admiral, Moro began to object, but Kravex raised a hand to silence him. I am responsible for the lives on these ships and for the future of the Empire. There are many worlds in the galaxy. Some will fall easily to our might. Others, he gestured toward the view screen showing Earth. Others may extract a price too high to justify the conquest. He turned to his navigation officer. Begin withdrawal procedures. Maintain defensive postures until we clear the system. The order rippled through the command chamber, officers moving quickly to their stations to implement the unprecedented command. For the first time in recorded history, the Zordic Empire was retreating. On Earth, the reaction was immediate. Movement confirmed, shouted Officer Grant in the Pentagon. The Imperial fleet is breaking orbit. They're moving away from Earth. A cheer erupted throughout the command center. General Miller allowed a small smile before raising her hand for quiet. Confirm their trajectory. Make sure this isn't some kind of tactical repositioning. Trajectory analysis complete, replied a technician after a moment. They're on a direct path out of the solar system, accelerating steadily. In the Rocky Mountains facility, Carol received the news with a mixture of disbelief and overwhelming relief. The technicians monitoring the quantum displacement devices looked to her for orders. Maintain targeting lock until they're beyond Mars orbit, she commanded. This could still be a feint. But as the minutes passed, the Imperial fleet continued its withdrawal, moving steadily away from Earth at increasing speed. When they passed the orbit of Mars without changing course, Carol finally allowed herself to believe it might be over. They're leaving, she said to Alan, who stood beside her watching the tracking displays. They're actually leaving. Alan nodded, his eyes wet, with tears of relief. Humanity just faced its greatest threat and didn't blink. That's something to be proud of. Across the world, as news spread that the aliens were retreating, people emerged from shelters to look at the sky. The long night of terror was ending, but the dawn would bring a new world, one forever changed by the knowledge that humanity was not alone in the universe, and that they had, against all odds, stood their ground. 3 days after the Imperial fleet left Earth's solar system, President Gregory Howard addressed the United Nations of Earth. The Grand Hall in New York had been quickly repaired for this historic occasion, though the city around it still lay in ruins. Leaders from every country on the planet attended, either in person or through secure video links. Billions of people watched the broadcast, hungry for answers and direction after the devastating attack. President Howard stood tall at the podium, his face showing the strain of sleepless nights but also a determined strength. People of Earth, he began, his voice clear and steady. Today we stand united not just as nations, but as a planetary civilization that has faced its greatest challenge. The attack on our world claimed over 4 million lives and destroyed countless homes and communities. We mourn these losses deeply, and we will rebuild what was taken from us. He paused, looking around the room at the assembled leaders. For the first time in recorded history, humanity was forced to confront the reality that we are not alone in the universe. The Zordic Empire, as they identified themselves in their retreat, represents an advanced civilization that has conquered many worlds before attempting to take ours. Murmurs spread through the crowd. For most people, this was the first time they had heard the name of their attackers or learned that the aliens had a vast empire beyond Earth. 3 years ago, unusual signals were detected from the edge of our solar system. A small group of nations working in secret began developing a defensive technology unlike anything we had created before. This project, which we called Deterrent, was our last line of defense against a threat we hoped would never materialize. On screens around the world, images appeared showing the underground facility in the Rocky Mountains and the quantum displacement devices that had saved humanity. When conventional weapons failed against the Imperial technology, we activated these devices. Using principles derived from recovered alien technology, we were able to demonstrate a capability that convinced the invaders to withdraw. President Howard didn't mention that the demonstration had depleted nearly a third of North America's power reserves, or that using all 6 devices would have sent humanity back to the pre-industrial age. Some truths were better kept classified, at least for now. Today I am announcing the formation of a unified Earth Defense Force, combining the military and scientific resources of all nations. Never again will we be caught unprepared. The road to recovery will be long, but we will rebuild together. And we will be ready should they ever return. The speech was met with thunderous applause. In the days that followed, a new sense of unity spread across the planet. Old conflicts and rivalries didn't disappear overnight, but they diminished in importance compared to the shared experience of surviving an alien invasion. In the Pentagon, 2 weeks after the withdrawal, Dr. Kevin Porter led a team of scientists studying the data collected during the invasion. His laboratory had been expanded, with resources and personnel from around the world assigned to his research group. The energy signatures from their propulsion systems suggest they use some form of space-folding technology, he explained to General Susan Miller during a briefing. If we can understand and replicate it, we could reach other star systems within years instead of centuries. Susan nodded. And their weapons? Can we develop defenses against them? We're working on it, Kevin replied. Their energy beams operate on principles similar to our particle accelerators but far more advanced. Given time and resources, I believe we can create shield technology. Eleanor Wright, who had been promoted to head the new Global Defense Council, joined the conversation. Time might be something we don't have much of. How long before they return? Or before some other alien civilization discovers us? Kevin shrugged. Impossible to say. But one thing is certain. We're no longer just looking up at the stars in wonder. We're preparing for what might come from them. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, the facility housing the quantum displacement devices had been expanded. Lieutenant Carol Bennett, now Colonel Bennett, supervised a team 3 times larger than before. The original 6 devices remained, but new prototypes were being developed with more efficient energy usage. The breakthrough came when we realized we could reduce the power consumption by adjusting the quantum field parameters. Dr. Alan Murphy explained as he guided Carol through the new research section. The next generation devices should require only 40% of the energy the originals needed. Carol studied the blueprints with approval. And the targeting precision? Improved. By a factor of 10, Alan said proudly. We could target a specific ship rather than just a general area. Let's hope we never need to use them, Carol replied. But it's good to be prepared. In Florida, Sam Rodriguez and his family had returned to their home, which fortunately had escaped damage. Sam had taken a job helping rebuild Miami, joining thousands of others in the massive reconstruction efforts happening around the world. One evening, as he sat on his porch watching his daughter play in the yard, a news alert came over his phone. The message was brief but significant. Astronomers had detected signals indicating the Zordic fleet had entered a neighboring star system, bypassing it entirely without any attempt at engagement. Sam showed the news to his wife, Maria. They're avoiding us, he said wonderingly. They could have attacked that system, but they didn't. Maria nodded. Maybe they're spreading the word. Stay away from Earth. The thought made Sam smile. Humanity, which had seemed so insignificant when faced with the technology of the Empire, had managed to earn something unexpected. Respect, or at least cautious avoidance. Far beyond the edge of Earth's solar system, Admiral Kravex composed his report to the Imperial High Command. He carefully detailed the encounter with Earth, the demonstration of the humans' quantum displacement technology, and his decision to withdraw rather than risk the fleet. In his private quarters, after submitting the report, he stood looking at a holographic display of the Zordic Empire's territory. Hundreds of star systems glowed with the Imperial colors, showing the vast reach of their civilization. The loss of one potential conquest hardly registered on this scale. Yet Kravex knew that his report would cause a fundamental shift in Imperial strategy. For the first time, the Empire had encountered a species that possessed both unexpected technological capabilities and an absolute, unwavering resolve to protect their world regardless of cost. He added a final recommendation to his report, something unprecedented in Imperial history. Earth would be designated as prohibited intervention territory in all Imperial navigational databases. The Empire would not be launching another attack on Earth. They had received their warning, and against all Imperial doctrine, they had chosen to heed it. As dawn broke over a healing Earth, humanity looked to the stars with new awareness. They were not alone in the universe, and now they knew they could stand their ground when needed. The Empire had launched an attack on Earth, and had received one final warning they would not soon forget.